why colleges should continue to reduce the importance of standardized test scores when it comes to college acceptances. Many of us have sat just like this with our head in our hands, stressing over the test at hand. You're on a time limit, there's people around you making noises that are distracting you, but your main goal is to get that high test score so you can get into a college of your choice. And with that comes a lot of test anxiety and stress. So standardized tests just bring on kind of a bad omen when it comes to your college acceptance process. You may be thinking, what are standardized tests? There are two big standardized tests when it comes to the college application process, and that is the ACT, which is the American College Test, and the SAT, which is a Scholastic Aptitude Test. These are both considered like an achievement test, so you're measured on how well you do. With the ACT, you're measured on your general knowledge and what you've learned through your years of education, and the SAT measures your potential to see how far you can go with your education. So the history of college acceptance tests began in the late 1800s. Leaders of elite universities came together and they decided that they were going to create a college board test that was generalized for everyone, and they could use it at their various universities to determine who gets accepted and who gets denied. That first test was administered in 1901, the College Board Test, and less than 1,000 people participated in it. If we fast forward a little bit to 1926, we see the development of the SAT, and that was made by Carl Bingham, making sure I say that correctly. And he was a professor at Princeton, and he decided to create this test to see the aptitude of incoming students. In this picture right here, we see many men who have just returned from World War II, and they're wanting to cash in on that GI Bill that they received. So they're taking this SAT score to see if they have potential to further their education with higher education. If we fast forward to about 1950s, E.F. Lindquist decided that the SAT was a little too pretentious, so he created the ACT, which was the American College Test, and it tests more of your general knowledge of what you've learned throughout your years of education, and he thought that that was more applicable when it comes to college acceptance, so you can see where a student is and how they need to be catered to when it comes to college. And then that first test was administered in 1959. If we fast forward to present day from that test, they're both still being given, but we see that people taking that test has declined. Pre-pandemic, about half of the universities and four-year institutions were very heavily weighed on your scores of these tests when it comes to acceptance. But following the pandemic, numerous universities began to kind of push it more to the side, and it was optional testing, which became more like a bonus factor when it comes to scholarships and class placement. The entire University of California made the test null and void, so they no longer accept any test scores because they just don't feel like it is applicable to their acceptance process now. Some pros and cons of standardized testing. So if we look at it as a whole, a big pro is that you can really test to see where a student is academically and how you can cater to their needs when they're entering higher up education. For my college personally at Ouachita Baptist University, they use that test to see if you need a remedial math course or kind of just refresher courses so you're able to exceed in your higher level classes. But there are many cons that come along with standardized testing. For one, as I mentioned before, the stress and anxiety that come along with it seems to kind of be overbearing and takes up a big portion of your college application process. And also your senior year, you're sitting there worried about what score you're going to get on your test so you can get into the college of your choice. A next con is the test. The price point of these is not very favorable to many people. If we see people who live in poverty and they want to get out of that, but they need to take that test to excel in higher education, but they don't have the funds to get that. They're kind of just pushed aside. If we look at it now, there are many African Americans and Latinos who are unable to attend college because they don't have the funds to even start the application process with these standardized tests. And I know for me personally, I consider myself very privileged when it comes to the things I need, but I was only allowed to take the test 3 or 4 times because my family couldn't continue to pay the money for multiple tests. So I had to make sure that each time I took that test, I was giving it 100% because I didn't know if I was going to be able to take it again. Another con being that people are not defined by the scores on the paper. When it comes to the test anxiety and stress, you tend to not perform to your best ability, so students aren't performing like they should, and they're losing their potential when it comes to colleges because their potential is a 27, but they're making a 24 on their ACT because they just don't have the confidence that it comes to with themselves. If we look now that standardized tests have become more of an optional testing thing, because over half of the major universities and four-year institutions no longer value the ACT and SAT scores, again because they have come to realize that students are not defined by their test scores. Person's potential when it comes to higher education cannot be defined by a 2-digit number on a piece of paper, rather than how they've excelled throughout their many years of education with extracurriculars, even taking higher level classes as a high school student. There are just many other factors that come to the college acceptance process rather than a simple test you take on a Saturday morning. A student should be able to feel comfortable in their college application process rather than the stress and anxiety of if they're good enough to be a college student. So that's why I think colleges should discontinue the use of standardized tests when it comes to their application and acceptance process.